The village heirloom. Did you know that in the heart of Nigeria, nestled between rolling hills and winding streams, lies a village called Ijebu Ode? It is a place where mornings begin with the crow of roosters, the scent of fresh palm oil drifting from kitchen fires, and the chatter of children running barefoot along dusty paths. This is the village where the story of Amaka begins, a story of faith, family, and the quiet power of an heirloom that would change the course of a young woman's life. Amaka was born into a family that had lived in Ijebu Ode for generations. Her father, Chief Obafemi, was a man respected across the village, not for wealth or title alone, but for his wisdom and fairness. Her mother, Mama Titi, was the village's unofficial healer, a woman whose knowledge of herbs and prayers was renowned even in neighboring towns. From a young age, Amaka had been raised with strong values, respect for elders, love for her community, and a deep reverence for the traditions that had guided her people for centuries. But there was something else Amaka had inherited, something even more sacred than the lessons from her parents. A small, intricately carved wooden box handed down through generations, passed from mother to daughter in every Obafemi household. The box contained a single, ordinary-looking stone, smooth and dark as river mud. To the untrained eye, it was nothing remarkable. Yet, to Amaka and her family, it was a symbol of guidance, protection, and the invisible threads that tied them to their ancestors. Her grandmother had often whispered, "This stone will show its power when the heart is pure and the path unclear. Guard it, and it will guard you." Amaka's life until the age of 22 had been quiet and predictable. She helped her mother at the market, fetching yams and kola nuts, arranging baskets of tomatoes and peppers, and selling palm oil she pressed herself. She would wake before dawn to help her father feed the livestock, then rush to school in town to finish her studies. And in the evenings, she would sit under the tall iroko tree in the village square, listening to the elders recount stories of past generations of spirits of bravery and of cautionary tales that shaped the hearts of young people. It was during one of these evenings, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, that Amaka first noticed something unusual. A stranger had arrived in the village. His name was Tunde, a young man from Lagos who came seeking land for farming. He had the kind of presence that made people pause, a quiet confidence, a smile that didn't feel forced, and eyes that seemed to look right through you. When he stopped by the market, Amaka was the one who sold him palm oil. And something about the way he spoke, politely yet with curiosity, left an impression on her that she could not easily shake. Over the following days, Tunde began to appear more often. Sometimes it was by coincidence, other times it seemed calculated. He would stop at the market to buy yams or kola nuts, always smiling at Amaka and asking how her family was. The villagers noticed, of course. They whispered among themselves, "The boy likes her," or "He's a good man, but will he honor her the way her family expects?" But Amaka did not rush to judgment. She had been raised to be cautious, to look beyond charm and beauty, to see the true measure of a person through actions and character. Then came the day her grandmother called her aside, her fingers tracing the edges of the small wooden box. "Amaka, child," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The time may come when the stone will show you its power. Do not be afraid to follow its guidance, even if it seems difficult. Remember, the heart of a person can be hidden, and the spirit can mislead you if you are not careful." Amaka nodded, not fully understanding. But as the days passed, she noticed a pattern. Whenever she faced a small dilemma, whether deciding which crops to sell first or helping an elder with a chore, the stone seemed to call to her. Not in words, but in a quiet certainty, a feeling that the right choice was near. And now, with Tunde, she felt that same unease mingled with curiosity. He was kind, yes, but she could not tell whether his intentions were pure. The village itself seemed to take notice of Amaka's growing interactions with the stranger. At the evening gathering, the elders would cast glances in her direction. "Do not be too hasty," her father advised one evening as they walked along the path home from the market. "A good heart is rare, but a hidden one can be more dangerous than an enemy at the door." Her mother, on the other hand, quietly handed her some herbs, saying, "These are for protection and clarity. Keep them close, and the stone will guide you as well." As the weeks passed, Amaka began to form a cautious friendship with Tunde. He was respectful, never rushing her, always willing to speak and listen in equal measure. The villagers began to soften, noticing that he worked hard and treated her with respect. But it was not only the presence of the man that changed Amaka's life. It was the decisions she had to make in her own heart, the balance between trust and discernment, between hope and caution. And then one morning, as the sun rose over the village, spilling light across the red dirt and palm trees, Amaka discovered that her father had been called to the town council in a neighboring city. He would be gone for several days. With him away, responsibility for the household and market fell squarely on her shoulders. It was in this moment, while arranging baskets of produce and counting coins carefully, that Tunde came to her with an offer to help her expand the market stall, to provide seed capital for more crops, and to ensure her family had a steady income while her father was away. Amaka hesitated. She remembered her grandmother's words. The stone called to her, a subtle warmth in her palm. She held it tightly, feeling the tiny vibrations of certainty. She could not yet see the full path, but she knew that one choice would open doors, and the other could bring ruin. And so, with a quiet prayer, she made a decision that would set her life in motion in ways she could not yet imagine. It was a simple decision, in one sense. She accepted Tunde's offer, but she set clear conditions. "I will work with you," she said, her voice steady, "but everything must be transparent. I will manage my family's money, and I will oversee the purchases. If I see anything amiss, we stop. Do you understand?" Tunde smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I understand completely," he said. And so it began. The days that followed were filled with work, small victories, and the occasional tension that comes from navigating trust. Amaka learned to balance her instincts with observation. She found herself consulting the stone daily, holding it in her hand while counting money or making decisions about the market. And slowly, she began to notice subtle patterns, not just in Tunde's behavior, but in the way the village itself responded. Neighbors offered advice, sometimes freely, sometimes with a watchful eye. Friends whispered stories of past mistakes, of trust broken and recovered. By the time her father returned from the city, Amaka had transformed the small stall into a modest but thriving business. Tunde had proven reliable, respectful, and generous in ways that spoke to character rather than charm. And through it all, the stone rested quietly in her palm, as though nodding in approval, reminding her that guidance, patience, and discernment were the invisible threads weaving the story of her life. Amaka's life began to settle into a rhythm she had not known before. The market stall was thriving, and Tunde had become a familiar presence, not just in the stall, but in the village. He helped with deliveries, carried baskets when the sun was high and oppressive, and even learned the names of the elders who came to trade. Yet, even with this apparent harmony, Amaka never let her guard down. She had learned early that trust had to be earned, not assumed, and the stone in her pocket reminded her daily of that lesson. One afternoon, as the sun hung heavy above the palm trees, Tunde suggested they visit the farm outside the village. The path was narrow and lined with cassava and yam fields, and Amaka noticed the distant smoke rising from cooking fires, the sound of children running barefoot as they chased chickens through the dust. The village was alive, as it always had been, but there was a subtle shift. Tunde's demeanor had changed slightly. He seemed anxious, as though carrying a weight he did not wish to discuss. At the farm, he paused by a small grove of kola nut trees and gestured for Amaka to sit. "Amaka," he said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been honest with you about many things, But there are matters from my past I have not shared. I want you to know now, before we grow closer, before you trust me fully." Amaka's hand instinctively went to the stone in her pocket. Its smooth surface seemed to hum faintly against her palm, as if urging her to listen and judge carefully. "Go on," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the sudden tension. Tunde took a deep breath and began. He told her of his upbringing in Lagos, of the struggles with relatives who had little faith in him, and of the small mistakes he had made as a young man, times when his pride had led to misjudgments, times when money had been mismanaged and trust had been broken. "I am not perfect," he admitted, his gaze falling to the ground. "But everything I have done since coming here has been to honor my commitments, to grow honestly, and to prove myself worthy of trust." Amaka listened intently. The story was familiar in its rhythm. Young men and women navigating the difficult intersection of morality, opportunity, and expectation. What mattered, she realized, was not the mistakes themselves, but the way a person responded to them. Tunde's sincerity seemed genuine, yet she consulted the stone silently, asking for clarity. It was difficult to interpret, but the warmth she felt suggested caution, tempered by hope. As the days passed, the market stall became more than a place of trade. It became a center for conversation, for advice, and for the subtle weaving of relationships. Women from neighboring villages came to learn from Amaka's methods, and men sought Tunde's counsel on farming and trade. The elders would often stop by, nodding in approval, their presence a reminder that the village observed, guided, and judged quietly but surely. Then came the festival of Egungun, a celebration of the ancestors. The villagers prepared for days, sewing colorful cloths, carving masks, and arranging drums and gongs. Amaka watched as Tunde assisted tirelessly, carrying supplies, arranging tables, and speaking politely to elders he had only recently met. The night before the festival, under a sky strewn with stars, the village square buzzed with anticipation. Fires were lit, casting flickering shadows on mud walls, and the drums echoed through the night, summoning spirits, memories, and the collective heartbeat of the community. Amaka found herself thinking about the stone again. She held it as she watched Tunde move among the villagers, interacting with respect, humility, and careful attention. The warmth she felt was steady now, a quiet approval that seemed to ripple from the stone to her heart. She began to understand that the true measure of a person was revealed not in words alone, but in repeated action, in the consistency of care, and in the alignment of intention with behavior. During the festival, a crisis emerged. A fire started in one of the granaries at the edge of the village, likely from a stray ember from the ceremonial fires. Panic spread quickly as villagers scrambled to save crops and livestock. Without hesitation, Tunde and Amaka rushed to help. Tunde coordinated a line of buckets from the well, while Amaka helped direct children and the elderly to safety. Their teamwork, calm under pressure, drew the attention of the village council and the elders. By the time the fire was extinguished, minimal damage had been done, but the event left a lasting impression. It was in the quiet that followed, as smoke drifted lazily into the night sky, that Amaka realized something important. Tunde's character had not only been proven through words or promises, but through the way he acted when the village itself was in jeopardy. She felt a surge of certainty, tempered by humility and caution, yes, but certainty nonetheless. Yet the story was far from simple. One evening, as Amaka walked back from helping a neighbor with her children, she overheard a conversation in the market square. A man from a nearby village spoke in hushed tones to another. "Be careful with that young man," he said. "I've heard stories of his family back in Lagos. Not all is as it seems. Watch the woman closely. A hidden debt or betrayal could follow them here." Amaka froze. Her mind raced. Was the stone warning her now? Or was it her own fear rising in response to gossip? She gripped the wooden box tightly, seeking clarity, and decided to confront the situation head-on. She approached Tunda that evening as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of crimson. "Tunda," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I overheard something today. I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything I should know about your family, about your past, about anything that might affect us here in the village?" Tunde looked at her steadily, and in that moment, Amaka realized that trust was not merely given, it was continuously tested, questioned, and reaffirmed. He took her hands in his and spoke sincerely. "Amaka, my past is not perfect. My family, like many, has had struggles. There have been mistakes, yes, but I have done everything I can to leave them behind. I want our lives here to be honest, steady, and honorable. I will never hide anything from you again." The warmth from the stone intensified as Amaka held it, as if affirming his words. She felt a sense of calm, not because challenges would cease, but because the clarity she sought was now within reach. In the weeks that followed, their bond strengthened, forged through trials, careful observation, and the quiet guidance of the heirloom stone. The following morning, Amaka awoke before the sun had fully risen. The village was still cloaked in the soft haze of dawn, and the air carried the familiar scent of wet earth and cassava leaves. She could hear Tunde humming softly in the courtyard as he prepared the fire for cooking. It was a simple melody, but it carried with it a rhythm of patience and care that seemed to settle the unsettled parts of her mind. She held the stone again, feeling its familiar weight, and allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps this is what it means to walk cautiously but trust fully," she whispered to herself. The village was waking slowly. Smoke spiraled from neighboring huts as early risers lit fires for breakfast, while children darted between stalls and the soft braying of goats punctuated the quiet. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary in the sense that every moment felt alive with potential, both for joy and for challenge. Tundi emerged from the hut, carrying a small bundle of plantain leaves and a basket of fresh eggs. "Good morning, Amaka," he said, his smile steady but unassuming. "I went to the farm before dawn. There's work to be done if we want to get the next harvest right." Amaka nodded. "I'll help you with the eggs. Let's see if we can sell some in the market later." She felt a small thrill of anticipation. There was pride in work that was done honestly, in the exchange of goods for sustenance, in the rhythm of a day that ended with hands dirty but hearts content. As they worked side by side, the village slowly came alive. Traders began setting up stalls for the morning market, their voices calling out the prices of yams, palm oil, dried fish, and charcoal. Women in brightly colored wrappers balanced baskets on their heads, moving with a grace honed through years of practice. Amaka and Tunde carried their goods, weaving through the crowds with care and attention, mindful not to spill or damage the produce. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor, an elderly woman from a neighboring village, known for her wisdom and connection to the spirits of the land. She approached Amaka and Tunde, her eyes sharp despite her years, and greeted them with a nod. "I hear there is a new household in the village," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "I have come to see how things are faring. It is always good to know the newcomers, to see if they respect the customs and the balance of life here." Amaka inclined her head respectfully. "We are settling in, Ma," she said. "It is not easy, but we are learning. We want to live honorably in the village, according to its ways." The elder woman's gaze shifted to Tunde, lingering on his hands and the lines of his face. "And you, young man?" she asked. "Do you understand what it means to carry responsibility not just for yourself, but for your household, for the village, and for the generations that follow?" Tunde straightened, his eyes meeting hers steadily. "I do," he replied. "I will work honestly. I will respect the village and its people, and I will care for Amaka as she deserves." The woman's eyes softened slightly, and she reached into her bag, pulling out a small charm woven from palm fibers and dyed with natural pigments. She handed it to Amaka. "This is for protection and guidance," she said. "Keep it close. especially when choices are difficult. Life is not without trials, but clarity comes when the heart is steady. Amaka accepted the charm with gratitude, feeling a sense of reassurance wash over her. She tucked it carefully into her waist wrapper, alongside the stone she had carried for years. It was not magic, she told herself, but a symbol, a reminder to trust carefully, observe diligently, and act with integrity. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of village life settled into a predictable cadence. Tunde and Amaka worked tirelessly, tending to the farm, managing their small stall in the market, and assisting neighbors when needed. Slowly, trust in the village grew, and the pair became known for their reliability and diligence. They were not the wealthiest or the most flashy, but their presence brought a sense of calm and steadiness to the market, and that was worth more than gold to many of the elders. But life, as it often does, brought its challenges unexpectedly. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high and the heat pressed down on the clay roofs of the village, a neighboring farmer came running toward their stall. His face was pale and his hands trembled. "Tunde, Amaka, you must come quickly." They followed him through the dusty lanes, the sounds of the market fading behind them. Ahead, a small boy from the village had fallen into the river while trying to retrieve a stray fishing net. The current was swift, and the boy's cries echoed across the fields. Without hesitation, Tunde dove in, the weight of his body cutting through the water with precise strokes. Amaka ran along the bank, calling out encouragement and praying silently as the crowd gathered. Minutes stretched into eternity. But finally, Tunde emerged from the river. The boy clutched tightly to his chest. The child coughed and sputtered, but he was alive. Amaka rushed forward, tears streaming down her face, and hugged Tunde fiercely. The villagers cheered, surrounding the pair with congratulations and blessings. That evening, as they returned home exhausted but grateful, Amaka reflected on the day's events. Trust, she realized, was not built only on quiet moments or careful planning. It was also forged in crisis, in the split-second decisions that revealed the core of a person's character. Tunde had proven, yet again, that he was not only committed to her, but to the values they had both chosen to uphold in their lives together. As they sat by the fire, preparing a simple meal of yam and palm oil, Amaka pulled the charm and stone from her waist. She held them in her hands, turning them over slowly, feeling their familiar weight. "We have come far," she murmured to Tunde, "and yet there is still much to learn. But I see now that we are ready to face it together." Tunde smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "Together," he echoed. And in that word, there was a promise, a quiet vow that life, with all its unpredictability, would be met with honesty, patience, and care. The weeks that followed carried both the rhythm of daily life and the weight of subtle tension that Amaka could not ignore. Tunde had returned to his work in the fields with renewed focus, tending to cassava, yam, and maize. But there were moments when his shoulders sagged under the invisible weight of worry. He rarely spoke of it, and Amaka learned not to ask, but she could sense that something was brewing beyond the surface. One morning, she woke to find him standing at the edge of the courtyard, staring at the distant hills that framed the village. The sun had just begun to rise, spilling gold across the red clay roofs and the rows of palm trees. Birds called in the distance, and the river sparkled as though it had caught fire. Amaka approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "Tunde," she said gently, "what troubles you so?" He turned to her, a faint shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. "Amaka," he began, his voice low, "there are matters at the farm that need immediate attention. Some of the crops have been attacked by pests, and if I do not address it soon, the harvest could be lost. It will take time, and perhaps even travel to the neighboring village for advice and supplies." Amaka nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The survival of their household depended on careful management of the farm, and any disruption could have lasting consequences. "Then we will face it together," she said firmly. "I can help prepare the produce, manage the market, and even assist in fetching supplies. We will not face this alone." A faint smile touched his lips, and he reached out to hold her hands. "I do not know what I would do without you," he admitted. "It is easy to forget that we carry more than just ourselves in this life. Together, perhaps, we can withstand it all." The next day, Amaka rose before dawn to accompany Tunde to the farm. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the faint lingering smoke from last night's fires. Villagers were already stirring, their voices mingling with the clatter of tools and the soft hum of livestock. Tunde led her along the familiar path, pointing out areas where the cassava leaves had been eaten and the maize stalks were beginning to bend under the weight of insects. They worked tirelessly, hand-picking affected plants, applying natural remedies, and marking areas that needed immediate attention. Sweat ran down Amaka's back, soaking the cotton of her wrapper, but she did not complain. There was a rhythm to the labor, a quiet meditation in the act of tending to the land. She could feel the connection to generations before her, the women who had labored on this soil, their hands shaping the earth in ways that fed families and sustained communities. By midday, they rested under the shade of a large iroko tree. Tunde handed her a small gourd of water, and she sipped gratefully. "Do you ever wonder if it will always be like this?" she asked, her voice soft. "The work, the uncertainty? Sometimes I fear that we will never see an easy day." Tunde shook his head slowly. "Life is rarely easy, Amaka, but it is in the struggle that we discover who we truly are. It is in the hardship that character is forged, and in patience that blessings are recognized. Remember, the earth gives in its own time, just as the river flows in its own rhythm." She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. The river, indeed, had carried the boy to safety just weeks before. Perhaps life, too, had its currents that could not always be controlled, only respected. As they returned to the village later that evening, Amaka could see that the market was bustling. Traders called out the prices of yams and beans. Children ran barefoot between the stalls, and women carried baskets brimming with vegetables on their heads with practiced ease. She and Tunde set up their modest stall, arranging their produce neatly. Their efforts were met with smiles and greetings from neighbors who had watched them grow into their roles within the community. That night, after the market closed and the village settled into the quiet hum of evening, Amaka and Tunde sat outside their hut, watching the stars emerge one by one. The fire from the hearth crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Tunde handed her a small bowl of pounded yam with palm nut soup, and she ate slowly, savoring the flavors that spoke of home and continuity. "I wonder sometimes," Amaka said, her voice almost lost in the night air, "if we will ever know peace without struggle." Tunde looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Peace is not the absence of struggle," he said. "Peace is the ability to endure it, to meet it with faith, and to grow stronger because of it. We have been tested, Amaka. The boy in the river, the challenges of the farm, the uncertainty of the market. All of it has brought us here, together, learning to rely on each other." Amaka reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and calluses that spoke of honest labor. She squeezed it gently. "Then let us face what comes next, together," she said. Weeks turned into months, and the farm began to flourish once again. Tunde's careful attention, combined with Amaka's growing experience in managing both the market and household, allowed their crops to thrive. The village watched in quiet admiration as the pair navigated the challenges of life with diligence, respect, and faith. It was during the festival of the yam harvest that the full impact of their journey became clear. The entire village gathered for the celebration, drums echoing through the fields, voices singing in unison, and children laughing as they ran barefoot among the decorated huts. Tunde and Amaka brought their produce to the communal feast, and for the first time, they felt a deep sense of belonging. They had proven themselves, not just to the village, but to themselves. As Amaka looked around, she caught sight of the elder woman who had given her the protective charm months before. Their eyes met, and the woman nodded, a subtle smile touching her lips. It was a quiet acknowledgement of resilience, of trust kept and lessons learned. That night, as the festival drew to a close and the village settled into a deep, satisfying sleep, Amaka and Tunde sat outside their hut once more. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the stars shone brighter than ever. She held Tunde's hand and whispered a prayer of gratitude. For the trials, for the lessons, for the small victories, and for the promise of tomorrow. Together, they had endured. Together, they had learned that life was neither simple nor easy, but that in patience, faith, and care, one could find moments of profound beauty and quiet triumph. And in that, Amaka realized, there was a story worth telling. A story not of riches or ease, but of life as it truly was. Challenging, unpredictable, and yet deeply, undeniably rich in meaning. Join the Story Circle today. Dive into the heart of Africa through mesmerizing folktales that capture real-life lessons, timeless wisdom, and unforgettable characters. Don't just listen, experience each story as if you were right there in the village. Subscribe now and be part of a community that celebrates the richness of African culture, one story at a time. Hit the bell so you never miss a tale that will inspire, teach, and transport you. The Story Circle, where every story connects us.